49ers are getting some important pieces back for what will be the most important game of the season. Find out next on Ernie's Nonsense. Hello and welcome to Niner Nate's Nonsense. We are here once again. Kevin may join us later on, but this week we've got Chris Polo of the Polo Show. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. A lot to talk about. Me and you were going to the game. Excuse the graphics. They're having a little bit of technical difficulties today. It seems like whenever I do this show, there's something going wrong, but we still do it anyways. Basically, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. We talked a lot on Tuesday with Jamal about the Falcons game and, what went wrong with the 49ers. I'd love to hear from your perspective, Chris. What you think went wrong in that Falcons game before we really get into the Kansas City game?
Well, a big part of it was there was just way too many injuries to overcome. You're down 7 starters, and then Ebukam was in and out. You can't really overcome that. I know that defensively it's really easy to say like they are the ones that kind of gave in, but in reality only 21 points to a team that averaged 23. Offense is still the problem to me all year. So even being able to hold that team below their season average with a bunch of backups, it felt like it was a preseason lineup out there and they still held their own. The offense needs to score. Listen, if you want to be a contender, you got to be able to score more than 21 points in a game. If you look at last year, when they beat the Cowboys only put up 17 points. We beat them, and it was pretty close. It was down the last possession. Jimmy kind of made it close. And if you look at the Packers game, Packers lost on some special teams plays, and people can say it's fluky all they want, but at the end of the day, they were getting dominated by the Niners defense, and that's what led to them losing that game at Lambeau. And when you go to the conference championship game against the Rams, Niners only put up 17 points, and they were up 10 points in the fourth quarter. At the end of the day, if you really want to be a contender, if you are not capable of putting up 24, 28, 27 points in a game, especially with an offense with this many all-pro caliber players, that's your issue. It has nothing to do with your defense. The defense has been number one when they're healthy, and to me, it's not even close. I think they definitely have the best defense in the league when healthy. I think they can even still be number one without Emmanuel Mosley. But offensively, if you're hoping to put up 20 points, you're in a really bad spot. So that's what needs to show up and be able to help out the defense win some games instead of the defense having to be damn near perfect just to squeeze by and get some victories. The offense needs to step up to the plate and help the defense out.
Absolutely. And first I want to say hello to Tanya, Junior Seau's cousin, I'm pretty sure. I think that's right. Pretty sure that's right. And of course, 49ers Throwback, one of our biggest fans on here. Appreciate you being on here. I totally agree with what you said. I mean, the offense just has never gotten going. And I don't know if it's because of the fact that, they had to switch quarterbacks 2 games into the season or what it's been, but the offense has been, it's weird to think about the fact that Kyle Shanahan is an offensive genius. And I understand that he's drafted the team. He's picked these players. And that's the reason the defense is stacked like it is. But the offense not scoring points for the first couple games of the season has always been a weird thing. Like last year, they played in the NFC Championship game, right? That's awesome. But the first 7 or 8 games, the offense was pretty dog shit then too. And so you think about it and you're like, what is the reason for this? Is it just because they start slow, or is it because Kyle Shanahan is one of those guys who comes out and wants to see what's going on with the other team and then he changes it from there? Or what me and Jamal talked about a lot, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Chris, is do you think it's that so many teams now run this Kyle Shanahan offense that basically you're seeing people figuring out how to stop the 49ers when they're just in a base concept, just barely running the offense, no trickery or any of that stuff? Do you think that's what it is? Or you think that it's just this is Kyle Shanahan and this is what people have to live with?
I think it's kind of teams are able to figure out certain things. Like, for instance, Debo in the backfield, teams are they're overloading on that. At least with Jimmy at quarterback, there's not that threat of like a Trey Lance read option. There's not the threat really where teams are afraid of Jimmy throwing the ball downfield. I mean, we could pull up the all 22 of so many guys sprinting free downfield and Jimmy's not seeing them. Although he has taken some more aggressive shots. It's just I don't think defenses are afraid of him taking those shots. So I think that with those plays that made the Niners really dynamic last year, because like you were saying, the offense was struggling. Teams aren't biting on that anymore. It's kind of like when Kaepernick was breaking the league with the read option, and teams are kind of saying, go after Kaepernick every single play, no matter what. Well, we're going to make sure that he's not keeping that ball. And I think teams are kind of doing that with Debo when he's in the backfield to a certain extent to make sure that we don't have that dynamic piece of our offense. So I think Shanahan has to get a little more creative in how he uses them. One play I really liked this year was in the Rams game when it looked like they were going to hand the ball off to Debo, but it was really just he was used as a misdirection to give the ball to Kyle Juszczyk. So, I think there's different ways you can use that. But obviously going to your backup quarterback, that changes the way that you plan this entire season to go. I think that a lot of it, and I don't want to get in this whole Jimmy G conversation. I think a lot of it is
We can
Jimmy
absolutely
G
get into
just
Jimmy G
straight up it's just he really planned on having Trey this year. He didn't even have Jimmy in camp this year. He didn't want him there. He didn't even give Jimmy a playbook. He was fully bought into Trey Lance as my starting quarterback, but they butchered that entire situation in the offseason. And then they kept him around, and then the injury happened. And now I think Kyle's having to find that balance between, well, I want to run a lot of what we had this year because we got players and we drafted players specifically to play a certain way, but I also need to add in the wrinkles of what we've done with Jimmy the last few years. I think it's kind of an interesting balance. But even like you said, last year we were struggling. So I'm not sure if it's a pattern with Kyle, if it's a pattern with Jimmy. It's probably a little bit of both, in all honesty. Because I remember the Eagles game last year or something like that. We didn't have a first down in the entire first quarter. There were multiple games where we just were starting out very slow. I think, however, for this year, I think we have to remember that Elijah Mitchell going down really hurt the offensive game plan. In that Bears game, he was averaging a ton. I think it was 8 yards a carry or something like that. So not having a lot of depth at running back, that's really what the Niners' identity is. Jimmy G threw the ball 40 times in Atlanta. We ran the ball less than 20 times. That's just not who the Niners are. That's not how a Kyle Shanahan offense is really supposed to be run. So I think right now they're having a bit of an identity issue. And I think that's what they need to figure out. But a lot of that is the lack of depth at running back, which is what's getting interesting as the Christian McCaffrey stuff keeps starting to heat up a little bit. And in hindsight, kind of makes me think it was really stupid to let Raheem Mostert go if now you're thinking of trading for a running back. But clearly they need another element to make sure they get back to we're running the football down your throat type of offense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is I completely agree with what you're saying is it is a lot of Jimmy. And I've actually wanted to have this conversation with you while you were here today, is that I think that how's the best way to say this? I think Jimmy Garoppolo has been completely serviceable this year.
Yeah.
I think anyone who listens to this show every week, the week we lost to Denver, I came on here and I had a 30-minute rant about how much he sucks. But since then, he's really picked it up. He's played decent. He's played better. I don't think he's playing the best football of his life. I think that's absolutely preposterous. Yeah. No way he's doing that because he's not elevating a football team. In 2017, he elevated that football team.
Yep.
And as long as he's continuing to be he's not the reason they're losing, but he's also not the reason they're winning. I don't think he's playing better football. But when you think about what he is and what he isn't, he's limited. He's always been limited. And I think as long as you're okay with having a limited backup quarterback as your starter, then this season will be, enough for you. But people tend to have the expectations because Trey Lance was a completely different beast, a completely different entity. He was going to be able to run the ball. He was going to be able to pass the ball. He was going to be able to at least scare, off defenses downfield. That, when Jimmy comes in, the offense gets a little dumbed down. It's not as fun. It's not as flashy. There's not as much going on with it. And so, if we're thinking about why the offense is floundering, it's Jimmy. And it is Jimmy because the offensive execution isn't there when Jimmy Garoppolo is at quarterback. It's kind of always been that way to start the season. And he'll get into a groove, and Kyle will get into a groove. They'll go on a run. The schedule's pretty easy. If we're being honest here. We can go over the schedule again, but it's pretty easy for the most part. So if I had to guess, it is on Jimmy. And I think that he's not the reason they're losing games, but he's not necessarily the reason they're winning games, and he's not the reason that their offense is not floundering. And so until they figure out a way to get him where he's in more of a groove of things, I just think that this is what the offense is going to be, and they kind of just have to live with it. And we just have to hope that they're able to overcome that deficiency, because Trey's not coming to play. And for people who want Purdy and Sudfeld on Twitter, you're on some fucking drugs, because those guys are way worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't care who you are. Brock Purdy and Nate Sudfeld are absolutely worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm not saying, people keep thinking I'm saying Jimmy Garoppolo is a great quarterback. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's the best at what we have right now. And Trey Lance is not going to he's not going to go into the cyberpunk world and get a brand new knee put in by the cyberpunk doctor. It's just not going to happen. He's not playing till next year. This is what we have to live with. And because that's what we have to live with, you need to be okay with when Jimmy Garoppolo plays average level football, because that's all you're going to get. When he plays dog shit, we can come on here, we can go on Twitter, and we can say, God, he fucking sucks. But until he does that, I'm not going to be that guy. And there's a lot of people on Twitter who are going to be that guy, and that's their prerogative, right? So, I mean, that's how I feel about Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know what else there is to be said there.
I can't put that last game on him either. Like he was playing decent. Like you said, it's not the best football of his life, but if Ray-Ray McCloud catches that ball, that drive should turn into points. If
Absolutely.
Charlie Werner catches that ball, that drive turns into points. And you're talking about a game where he has over 300 passing yards. I don't put that first interception on him. It was just kind of a heave down the field at the end of the half. It's whatever. Like, it was not he was actually the heavy portion of the offense. And that's why I kind of feel like I'm starting to get to the point where at first I was like, no, I would not trade for Christian McCaffrey because he's a running back. I don't think you really trade draft capital for running backs, especially veteran running backs, and injury-prone running backs as well on a pretty expensive contract. But now that I'm starting to think about it, and I'm starting to remember Trey's going to be on his rookie deal, and Elijah Mitchell's not very healthy either. And if this is the situation the Niners are going to be put in with Elijah Mitchell as the starter where he goes down, like what if he comes back? I don't want to put this in there, but what if he comes back, plays a game, tweaks an ankle, he's out for another 4 weeks. And we're looking at this again with just Jeff Wilson getting majority of the carries, Tevin Coleman maybe getting a couple here and there, and then Shanahan continuing to hate Jordan Mason's guts for whatever reason, just never letting him see the field. I think they need to go out and get Christian McCaffrey at this point. It kind of feels like this is a team that's so elite defensively. You can't let that go to waste. You have to maximize that and see if Christian McCaffrey can give you a spark. One this year to see, like, maybe, because the NFC right now to me sucks. I think the NFC is terrible. Like, if you look at the Packers and the Bucks, I thought those teams would be better. I thought the Rams, although like I didn't expect them to be as good as last year, I still thought they'd be better. They suck. The Cardinals are a joke. The Seahawks might have the second best team in this division at this point, the way I see it. The Eagles, they're really good. I do feel like they're going to come down to earth. The NFC East, I feel like those teams are going to come down to earth, but the Cowboys defense is pretty legit.
Cowboys defense is tremendous.
Like this is as wide open as the NFC could be. And like for instance, last year, I saw the Rams before the season started. I was like, that team's probably going to the Super Bowl. And then they got Odell and Von Miller, and I was like, yeah, that team's definitely probably going to the Super Bowl. I don't see a team like that in the NFC right now. It could be so many different teams that end up in that NFC title game. This is the year you have to max out and do whatever you can to see if you can just give your offense, give your team a spark that could just get you over the hump. And if you get to a Super Bowl, you never know what could happen in that game. So I see it as now I'm doing, if it makes sense, unless it's like multiple first-round picks, which the Niners don't even really have at this point, but I'm getting Christian McCaffrey. Because even if you don't pull it off this year, I'm really interested in what that offense would look like with Trey Lance, Christian McCaffrey, and like Kyle Juszczyk or Deebo Samuel in the backfield. I think that would be a really dynamic offense. I think that's going to be a Shanahan wet dream to scheme up. And then also, of course, you have Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver and you have Kittle at tight end. So if they can if they can make that happen, I think that would be a great move for this team. I kind of shift the way I originally thought about it in terms of trading for running backs.
Chris, do you feel like, McCaffrey has had a lot of injuries and he's a pretty high paid guy? I think his cap hit for 2022 is about $8 million. And I think they could probably find a way to afford that. That's fine. But next year it's 19 million. And in 2024, it's 19 million. And in 2025, it's 15 million. Are you cool with paying a running back who has been injured for a lot of his career that kind of money after you're also, probably trading probably a second round pick for him, also pay him that kind of money? I mean, are you good with that?
I'm usually really not. The reason I think I would maybe be okay with it is because I'd rather see the Niners max out Trey Lance's rookie deal. And that was really the point of having a quarterback on the rookie contract in any way they can and just making the money work for however many years they need to do that.
So you're saying giving Trey Lance, Christian McCaffrey, because that money would be because Jimmy won't be here next year, right? Like that's
right.
the idea. So that's what 24 million coming in. But the problem is most of that is then going to Christian McCaffrey.
The problem for me is you're having to make sure you still pay Bosa. And then Brandon Ayuk is coming up too. I think a lot of people forget that. I don't think Kinlaw gets another contract. I don't think so.
I don't think he's going to play in the NFL much longer, to be honest with you.
Eric Armstead at some point may end up becoming a trade asset for them. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to bring back Samson Ebukam because they're going to have to pay Bosa so much. For me, I think that they're so good at getting the most out of under the radar guys on defense that if you still have Mooney Ward and you have, hopefully they can bring back Mosley. I would prefer Mosley over Jimmy Ward at this point. But if you have Hufanga and you have Mooney Ward and you have Fred Warner and you just extended Greenlaw and you still have Nick Bosa, I think you're going to be able to put together a good enough defense. Like, you don't need the number one defense in the NFL to win a Super Bowl. But I will tell you, if you have the number one defense, you better not have a dog shit offense because that can just make that number one defense not even matter. So I'd rather have that balance. Like, there are times where a terrible offense might win a Super Bowl with an elite defense, like the Broncos when they won in Peyton Manning's last season. He didn't even throw a touchdown in that Super Bowl. Unless you have like a team like that, sure. But in reality, I'm seeing a team of all pros still not be able to get it done. So at this point, who knows? Maybe Kittle is used as a trade asset at some point. I have no idea. But I see it, one, as Trey's rookie deal. I need to max that out. But also, you do have veterans. They're here now. You're ready to win right now. If you can make the money work, you do it. I don't want it to be a situation where we get 2 years down the road from now, we're sitting with no Super Bowls, and we were so close in 2 years, and then we're just sitting there like, oh, but at least the Niners kicked the tires on Christian McCaffrey. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be in that kind of situation. If they can make the money work, make it work. Because, like, Trent Williams is not getting any younger. George Kittle's not getting any younger. These guys are all pro caliber players that you can win with right now. When they're like 4 years down the road, you might have to just reboot and try to replenish those players all over again. And I want to max this out at this point where they're at, especially with the NFC just so wide open to me. So honestly, yeah, if they can make it work, I'm okay with trading away a couple picks because the Rams just did that shit and they won a Super Bowl. I know that right now they're down bad and they have a horrible team, but I think the Niners have a much better foundation than the Rams did. I think the Rams just kind of went all in on a few players and it worked. They pulled that shit off. But I think the Niners have a much better foundation of players that they already have in-house. I think they develop players better as well.
I think I've always thought the Niners are the best roster organization in the NFL. I think that with Kyle and the way they draft and the fact that they continue to hit, on late round picks, when you're hitting on late round picks in the draft, it gives you the ability to spend more money. Now, here's my thing is I don't like spending money on running backs. I fucking hate it. I hate spending high draft picks on running backs. Fucking hate it. But since the time that I was really against it 2 weeks ago, when it started coming out after we played Carolina, right after we played Carolina, they might trade him. And to now, which has been a game and probably a half, but there's still only been one game since. I'm beginning to think that while Jeff Wilson is fun and a decent running back, that maybe having a superstar running back who can also catch the ball and run from the backfield and just help Jimmy Garoppolo out could set this team up to win a Super Bowl. I do agree, and I think that the one thing that I was worried about, which was the offensive line with all the injuries, I haven't really seen a difference. It hasn't really felt like Jimmy Garoppolo is running for his life or Jimmy Garoppolo is getting sacked constantly. And I understand when they played the Atlanta Falcons, but Grady Jarrett's a pretty decent defensive player, and he wasn't destroying Garoppolo all day. And so that paired with the fact that their defensive line is going to be healthy and unhealthy all year. But the one thing I do worry about is Kinlaw's probably not going to play football again, most likely. I think he does have arthritis in the knee, as Jesse Naylor has said on this show many times. But with Bosa and Ebukam, I feel pretty confident. I feel confident with the linebackers. I feel confident with Verrett replacing Emmanuel Mosley. I don't think there's a trade target, the guy you would really want to trade for a corner. I'd love to have a better backup tight end, which is where Mike Gesicki comes in. But I think that when we're thinking about who could possibly be traded, I think now that we've seen the offense kind of sputter again against a not great football team, I do think that Christian McCaffrey might be the best option for this team to really figure out the offense. Because once this offense gets figured out and Jimmy can kind of just play within a script, not have to do anything out of the ordinary, maybe throw the ball downfield a couple times, not do anything crazy, this team will probably be good enough to win the Super Bowl, just because I think the Eagles are very good. I think their roster is very good. I think Jalen Hurts is playing very good football. But do I think that if Philadelphia came into Levi's, they would win? No. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. Dallas, we've beaten before. Their defense is better, and that'll be a closer game than it was last time. I don't think Dallas is going to beat us, and I definitely don't think the Minnesota Vikings are going to beat us. So, and I think we're going to beat Tampa Bay when they come to town later on with Tom Brady. So It's just right now, it feels like find a way to get this offense going, and I think the offense is going to get going against Kansas City, but find a way to get the offense going, and this team will do what it needs to do. Real quick, before we get into that Kansas City game, we really break it down, I want to talk to you about something that's kind of been a little popular on 49ers Twitter, and I think that it's an interesting conversation. And it's the Jim Harbaugh conversation. Honestly, I have stayed off of it for the most part on Twitter. I don't like arguing with people. I'm not really into that about every little thing. I'll argue with people every once in a while. But Chris, I just want to hear your perspective on it, because personally, I was like, Jim Harbaugh's a great head coach. Kyle Shanahan's a great head coach. I don't think we need to compare them. They've both been to a Super Bowl. They've both been to two NFC championship games. I guess Jim Harbaugh went to 3, but still, Jim Harbaugh inherited a pretty decent roster with a couple Pro Bowlers, pretty decent football team that Singletary basically fumbled because he couldn't coach his way out of a paper bag. And Kyle inherited one of the worst rosters in the NFL and turned it into a Super Bowl team. And I think that they're both tremendous head coaches, but I think people forget when you're looking with those nostalgia glasses, there was some shit that Jim Harbaugh did that was so bad. Like, he was the most conservative head coach I've ever watched, more conservative than Kyle even is. And they couldn't get the play call off ever. Like, there was always delay of games with Jim Harbaugh out there. And I don't know if it was like Jim Harbaugh couldn't talk to Colin Kaepernick or they couldn't work together, but at least Garoppolo can get the playoff on time. It just felt like there were certain things. And this isn't me saying Jim Harbaugh is a bad Jim Harbaugh. See, 49ers Throwback wrote John Harbaugh right here. It's Jim Harbaugh, you bastard. And so I don't think either of them is a bad head coach, but I'd rather have Kyle personally. I'd love to know what you think.
They're so different. I think Kyle comes off more as the hard ass. Jim Harbaugh, you could see him really rally the team. Like, it was visible, like the way he would slap up Alex Smith's pads. We say that he inherited a roster. I get it. There are absolutely talented players on that roster, but let's not forget what Alex Smith was to the fan base before Jim Harbaugh got here. Let's not forget that fans were chanting for David Carr at Candlestick Park against the Eagles in prime time. He came in. There were a bunch of new starters too. What he did was he shifted the whole culture. And Shanahan, I think what you could say they've done under this regime is they've built a better roster. They've been more consistent at developing talent, finding underrated talent. But I also think of it from this way, because we think about the Jim Harbaugh and Kyle Shanahan thing. I think a lot of people forget Jim Harbaugh didn't have a GM that wanted to work with him. John Lynch at least wants to work with Shanahan. And that's one thing that I think was very important to Jed York, because I'm pretty sure he admitted himself too, like taking sides with Trent Baalke was a mistake. I'm pretty sure he admitted that. I'm not 100% sure. We saw the year with Jim Tomsula. We saw the year with Chip Kelly. And when they went to that coaching search and looking for a new GM, we saw how it was always the both of them. It was together, and it seemed very important to Jed. Like, no, I need two guys that are on the same damn page, because I had something amazing and it got ruined because two guys couldn't get along. And I think we've seen that, even though people want to criticize Kyle or criticize John, fair, whatever. But they're on the same page and they're working together to build these rosters, and they've built some damn good rosters ever since they've gotten here. And I think if Harbaugh had a John Lynch as a general manager who would work with him, I think we would have seen more success. It kind of felt like Trent Baalke just didn't know what the not even felt like he really didn't. He didn't know what the fuck he was doing.
He didn't know what the fuck he was doing. He's one of the worst GMs in the history of football.
It was terrible. It was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen from a front office executive. And I think the difference is Trent Baalke was a guy just kind of keeping his job, and John Lynch is a guy who actually tries to do his job and try to improve the roster. Like, the Niners would not be calling for Christian McCaffrey if Trent Baalke was GM right now. We'd be paying Christian Kirk $84 million. And like that's just the difference. Like if Jed chose Jim Harbaugh and found another GM to work with him, like, people forget, if you look at Jim's record and you look at the success they had in those 4 years together, he is one of the greatest head coaches this franchise has ever had. One of the best records in winning percentages, never had a losing season. Every year except that last season went to an NFC championship game and was a few yards away from winning a Super Bowl. It's really tough. I think that Shanahan as an offensive mind is definitely much better. Absolutely play calling, 100% I'm going to Shanahan. I think maybe in terms of just bringing a team together with that culture, I feel like that's really done by Jim Harbaugh more than it is Shanahan. Like, the energy that you saw from Harbaugh and how involved he was in every single game and not kind of behind his play sheet all Sunday, you see that in Robert Saleh when he was here, and his passion and his energy on the sideline. We see it from D'Amico Ryans on the sideline. I rarely ever see emotion from Shanahan. And I don't know how much that really plays into a factor. I'm not at the practices, but I do think that Shanahan rubs a lot of people the wrong way in the way that he kind of goes at reporters and press conferences every Sunday, or not every Sunday, but every week after the offense struggles. Like, he is supposed to be an offensive genius. You have Deebo Samuel, you have Brandon Ayuk, you have Trent Williams. I know he's been injured, but you have a quarterback that you did trade for. You should be able to be putting up more than 14 points in Atlanta. And I'm not putting the game on Kyle either, but it does get to a point where you have to talk about the execution, how that relates to the head coach, and also taking 8 minutes to turn the ball over on downs when you're down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. That I'm putting on the head coach, because you should have had hurry up offense in that situation. We've seen questionable decision making from Kyle. So listen, they're both guys who are so far have been good enough to not win a Super Bowl so far. So it's really tough. I do think both coaches were good enough to win a Super Bowl. I think Kyle will get one. It's really just tough to say, though, because we didn't see Harbaugh go through the valleys that Shanahan's had to go through. Like, Shanahan has had situations where his roster was shit when he got here. He had to inherit actually the aftermath of Trent Baalke's horrible job. And then had horrible quarterbacks and had a team that was really injured in 2020. So it's really tough to say. I probably give the edge X and O's wise to Shanahan, but in every other aspect of just leading a group of people, I probably give it to Harbaugh, because you look at the way he impacts every team he's been a coach for as a head coach, even going back to Stanford. He's able to take any program and just make it very good.
Yeah, no, I think they're both great head coaches. I'm super happy we have Kyle. I'm glad we got to watch Harbaugh, in his only NFL coaching job. And I think that Colin Kaepernick made, Jim Harbaugh so fun, because that kid was so talented when he first entered the league.
Yeah.
There's things you can talk about what happened, when he was there, and the fact that, it felt like certain things the team got worse around him and he got worse and it just wasn't fair to him. And there's so many things that happened with that kid that are kind of a bummer. But when he was here, Jim Harbaugh was the head coach. Those were some of the most fun years, outside of, 2019 for me. I think 2019 was a blast just because they were killing people so bad. But listen to the team they played in 2019 in the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs are coming to town. A rematch of Super Bowl from 2019, 2020 season, technically, where the 49ers blew a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. They're very different teams now. Obviously, it's the same quarterbacks, but the team is around them is a little different. The Chiefs are no longer with Tyreek Hill. Their number one receiver is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, which is pretty wild. And then the 49ers are better on defense at corner. Richard Sherman, was there, but Mosey was there. Obviously, was younger, wasn't as good as he is now. It looks like it's probably going to be Verrett and hopefully Mooney Ward. We'll see what happens there, but it might be Verrett and Womack. We'll see what happens with Mooney Ward tomorrow at practice. If he shows up to practice tomorrow, then he'll play. But it looks like they're going to get Nick Bosa back. They're going to get Trent Williams back. How are you feeling about this Kansas City game? It seems like the Niners are getting a little healthier. Kansas City's defense is pretty dog shit. One of the worst in the league, which is nice. Which is when you play bad defenses, generally your offenses should figure out ways to get going. And Kyle Shanahan, as me and Jamal spoke about on Tuesday, really tends to get up for big games like this. Kyle is not someone who, if it's a big game on the other side of the field and he has his team and they're healthy, he doesn't phone it in. That Rams game was as big as it got this season, and they blew them out of the water. The Rams game last season blew them out of the water. When he plays Bengals last year, figured out a way to win. The teams that he should beat, or the teams that he feels that he's better than, and they are better, currently better record, or currently, they're an underdog to, Kyle tends to get up and generally gets the job done. So, I'd love to know how you feel about this Kansas City game going into Sunday.
I don't feel great about it. I think, one, you jinxed us, so there's that working against us. But also, because their secondary is so dog shit, you know what that means, right? They're going to blitz the shit out of Jimmy Garoppolo because it's Steve Spagnuolo. And if their corners are so bad, and I think they're missing a guy too at that position. If their corners are so bad and their secondary is so bad, and you're playing Jimmy G, and you know that he's not a mobile quarterback, he can't throw the ball really accurately outside the numbers, he's not accurate throwing down the field, make him throw the ball very quickly and just put a bunch of pressure on him, make him panic. The dude tap dances back there. He doesn't see open guys when he feels the pressure. We've seen that time and time again. I think you're going to see a good amount of blitzes to make sure they're just constantly putting pressure on Jimmy, because what I think teams saw in that against Atlanta was they were not able to run the ball, and by forcing Jimmy to throw as much as they did, they were out of their element. That's not the way they want to play, and I think that's the point, is you have to make Shanahan's offense play a way that they don't want to play going into the week. Atlanta's defense was terrible too. On average, going into the game, they gave up 400 yards a game. They gave up 115 yards rushing per game. They gave up almost 300 passing yards per game, and we still only put up 14 points. So the difference here now is, yes, you're getting guys back on defense, but now you're going to play Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and Andy Reid is going to be, calling the shots over there on that sideline. And on defense, you still got a beast like Chris Jones, right? And you still have Jimmy at quarterback, who we were saying was limited. If there's guys wide open and he's not seeing them, if he's not hitting those throws like Kittle down the field on that third down, or if guys aren't catching the ball down the field, like, you can't afford these kinds of mistakes. That, I think that's the issue is with Jimmy. He's limited, so limited to the point where your margin for error is very, very slim. And this offense as a whole has not executed very well, and they keep making those mistakes. So that's where I'm not feeling too great. I do feel pretty good about the defense as long as Mooney Ward is playing, but I don't know about that offense, regardless how bad that Kansas City defense is. I think the offense is going to struggle. I've just kind of accepted that that's who they're going to be. Jeff Wilson's going to get majority of the carries, and he's going to somehow average between 3 to 4 yards a carry, no matter what. He just always ends
he's
up
not
around
Trey
there.
Sermon, right, Chris?
Yeah, at least he's not Trey Sermon, thank God. But at this point, I wouldn't even mind Trey Sermon getting carries on this team because nothing is working. So it can't possibly get worse than 14 points against the Falcons. So well, I don't know. Maybe with Trey Sermon it would. Who knows? But I think the offense is going to be struggling. So I see this being a pretty close game. I think it ends with one team having the chance to go down the field and win it, and it'll come down to that drive. I don't know who's going to have the ball, but I think it will come down to that drive. And I'll say if it's the Chiefs that are down with a chance to win, I think they'll win the game. I think if it's the Niners that have the ball on a final drive with a chance to win the game, they'll lose. So that's how I think it's going to pan out.
It's funny because me and Jamal put this exact scenario in people's heads towards the end of the show. And I do think that's where it's going to go, right? I think that it's going to be up to Kyle to get this offense going. That's the number one thing. If Kyle can get this offense going against the Chiefs, this is a game that I think a lot of people are going to be watching. When you look at the slate of games on Sunday, Niners-Chiefs is a pretty important game, and I think this is the biggest game of the 49ers season. Yeah. I think that you need to beat the Chiefs. And it's not just because it puts you to 3-4. You need to beat the Chiefs because this is one of those games that when you talk about the locker room and you talk about the way these guys talk and the way these guys think, beating the Chiefs at home is one of the things I think that would skyrocket the Niners' confidence and skyrocket the Niners' their feelings that they are better and they can win the Super Bowl this year. Because if they beat the team that beat them in the Super Bowl, anything is possible. And I know they're inevitably probably going to play Buffalo. If they get there, they won't play Kansas City, it looks like, because Buffalo's their defense is just better this year. It really feels like their defense might be the thing that puts them over. Even though that game was very close and those teams will definitely see each other, it's going to be in Buffalo. It's not going to be in Kansas City, which that's very different for them, but that's besides the point. I just really feel like this is the game that can change the whole season around. If they can find a way to get the offense to score, I don't want to see a shootout. I really don't want to see a shootout, but if they can just hold Mahomes to 24, 26 points, something like that, then anything's possible because Nick Bosa is going to be on him. The NFL is already kind of put out a couple statements over the last couple weeks that they're looking more into these holding penalties on, defensive ends. The reason that the Chiefs beat us, or one of the reasons that they beat us, obviously there's other reasons, but the reasons that a lot of people beat the Chiefs is because they held Nick Bosa. They're not going to be able to hold him as much, hopefully. And then if Mooney Ward's back, I think that their lack of wide receiver talent will come back to bite them against great corners. And I think that while Patrick Mahomes is going to make the plays, get downfield, score points at Levi's, I think that they can hold him to a punt here every now and then, not just driving down the field every time. I really think anything is possible. And I think that the defense is the difference maker in this game because it's even better this year, Mooney Ward plays, than it was in 2019, and they barely didn't win the Super Bowl. And the only reason they didn't win the Super Bowl is because Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't make any plays. So if they can get the run game going, they can continue to take shots downfield, they spend time on the jugs machine, get the ball to George Kittle, get the ball to Deebo Samuel, get the ball to Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk was not there when they played them in the Super Bowl. Yeah. There is a lot of factors that I don't know if the Chiefs are ready for because of the fact that the 49ers are coming off a loss. This is kind of a different game for them. It's an old foe that really cost them their legacy. You think Joe Staley, who's going to be on that sideline on Sunday, doesn't hate the Chiefs with every passion. He hates the Chiefs and he hates the Ravens because they kept him from greatness. And Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, all these guys Jimmy Ward, gotta feel like these are the guys that kept us from truly being great. And I understand this isn't the Super Bowl. I understand this isn't the NFC Championship game, but you have to go out there and you have to leave it all on the field. I don't care what you have to do. You have to put everything into this game because this is the game people remember this football team for. If they go out there and they play the Chiefs and they lay an egg, everyone is going to remember the Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyle Shanahan 49ers as a team that when the stakes were as high as they got, they went out there and laid an egg and didn't put out their best foot. And so my thing is, you go out there and you find a way to win. You have to find a way to win. If you do not find a way to win, this season might be over because you're not going to make it to the Super Bowl. You're not going to make it to the NFC Championship game. This is the game you have to show that your offense is not the dog shit that everyone in the world thinks it is.
Yep. Yeah, no, this, like you said, this is a game where that's where you build the confidence. It's going to be a good energy, a different energy in the building. If you have Jim Harbaugh and the 2012 team there, a team that went to the Super Bowl, a team of years past, and then you're playing a team that you lost against in the Super Bowl to, and you remember George Kittle on the sideline saying that he was going to be back with a vengeance. Now you're having a chance to face that team again. There's a different kind of fire that's going to be lit up under that team. So, yeah, this is a game. There's going to be more emotion probably going into it, and however you come out of that with a win or loss, it's going to have a bigger impact on the locker room and just them in general. Because there's a big difference between saying, "Hell yeah, we just beat the second best quarterback in the NFL, and now we're 4-3. We're definitely capable," and then losing the game and saying you're 3-4, and then you're going into the week against the Rams, who is a divisional rival. Like, that's two big games in a row, and it'd be really nice to get the first one. And yes, I said second best. Josh Allen's number one.
That's not a conversation we're having. Right now, Josh Allen is number one because he beat Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, but I still think Mahomes is better.
Jesse, you heard it, Jesse.
We'll see how long that lasts. I mean, and also, this is a big game for the division, right? Like, the Seahawks are 3-3, the Rams are 3-3, the Cardinals are probably going to win tonight, so that'll move them up. I really think that, they need to win this game to keep in this division race, because winning the division should be the number one thing, right? But to win a division when it's going to be this close, I don't know if it's going to be this close forever. I think the Seahawks are absolute dog shit. I think they're terrible, but they're winning football games. Granted, it was against the Broncos and Russell Wilson, who we've seen is terrible, and it was against the Lions, and I think they also beat the Cardinals, who also aren't good. So, and then the Rams, I think, beat Carolina. Who else have the Rams played?
I don't even know who they played. I honestly... week 2, they played some dog shit team, I think. I can't remember.
Did they?
I think so. Because they went 1-1.
I really feel like... And while the 49ers have lost they beat the Falcons.
Right.
The Carolina Panthers, the Falcons, and the Cardinals were they beaten. And I just feel like they barely beat the Falcons. And I know the Niners have lost to bad football teams. I totally understand that, but I just think that that's how this team is. Rams are not like that, right? The Rams are a team that generally gets going from the start. They generally are going. The Rams are having a down year. The Seahawks are awful on defense. They might be the worst defensive team in the league. I mean, they can't stop a nosebleed. And so I think the division will kind of even out, but winning games like this is how you show to the power ranking guys, the people who tend to look into this, now, but with a view into how it's going to be later on. Those people tend to watch a game like this and make their the things they think about this football team and put out into the world. And so I really feel like going out there and sacking Mahomes is going to be paramount, and keeping the ball in the Niners' hands. Finding ways to make long drives down the field to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. I think that's really important as well.
Every time the Niners are getting the ball, I'm going to tweet out that video of Garoppolo jogging onto the field in the Super Bowl. Every single time we get the ball, it's going to be a game for him. It's going to be a revenge game. But listen, the stakes are different. Like you said, like, it's not the same team. It's not the same matchup as 2019. In 2019, in a legacy drive, Jimmy G overthrew Emmanuel Sanders. This Sunday, he might have a legacy drive where he overthrows Brandon Ayuk instead. This is totally different. We're just going to have to see how it plays out.
Kevin's not going to be on here today, it looks like, but you made me think of Kevin. That sounds like something you would say. Chris, let's do a score prediction and get out of here, because I'm frying in this room. It is really hot with this light on.
I'm going to go... It's going to be pretty bold. I am going to take the Niners to win. I'm going to say it's going to be 27-23.
I'm going 27-24. San Francisco. And okay. It's gonna happen, and we're gonna be there, and we're gonna be going fucking bonkers when Robbie Gould hits that field goal. We're gonna be going absolutely fucking nuts. It's gonna be the coolest shit ever. I can't wait. I'm super excited to go to this game. I think this is a game that This is one of those games you go to Levi Stadium and you remember, being at Levi Stadium when they did this, because this is the game where they turned the season around and went on to win whatever odd games and go to the Super Bowl or whatever happens, right? Anything's possible at this point.
This is the first year where I get nervous in the line up for field goals, though, because now I don't know if it's going to get blocked. It's twice. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. We'll see. I mean, I still trust Robbie Gould with my heart and soul if need be. If my life was on the line and all I had to do was let Robbie Gould kick a field goal in order for me to live, I'd let him do it.
I would let him.
I trust Robbie Gould. Robbie Gould is good as Gould, and I think that he's going to win this game. Chris, if they want to check out your stuff, how can they do it?
Yeah, so if you hit my Twitter, it's just my first and last name. So Chris Polo, 2_. My link tree's in there to my YouTube channel, the articles we write at Stadium Rant for Niners Empire. You can check it out all there. But you can also just search up the Polo Show on YouTube. If you subscribe, you'll be eligible for other giveaways I do. I just did a Nick Bosa jersey giveaway a few weeks ago. I'm not sure when I'm going to do the next one, but the next one's going to be a Hufanga jersey. I made up my mind on that after that pick 6 against LA. It's definitely going to be the next giveaway. I also do Warriors shows. So you and me will be doing a Niners preview show on my channel this time. So that'll be tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific. And then I'm also going to try to do one Warriors show a week. So if you want content, Niners and Warriors, just look up the Polo Show on YouTube, and I'll be doing shows weekly.
And you can find me at Niner849 on Twitter. And then we do a show at least every Tuesday. We'll probably be back with Jamal on Tuesday next week. Maybe we'll get Kevin on that show. We'd have a little longer show, but I'm going to fry in this room today. It is insanely hot. It was 94 degrees outside, and I closed the door, and I'm dying in here. But go Niners. Beat the Chiefs. This is the game. You go out there, you take care of business, you show who you are, and this is the game we're going to remember on when we're hoisting that trophy, hitting that parade down the street in San Francisco with Steph Curry hanging out with Jimmy Garoppolo and all of them. Because honestly, I believe Steph Curry should be in every parade that happens in this city for the rest of his career. I don't give a shit if he plays basketball, if it's a baseball super championship, if it's a hockey championship. Steph Curry should be allowed to be in the parade. I don't care. The guy has maybe topped Joe Montana and Jerry Rice as the greatest Barry athlete of all time.
But Nate, if we don't win on Sunday, I am buying a bacon-wrapped hot dog and I'm throwing it at you in the parking lot for jinxing us on Twitter. So just know that your legacy is at stake right now too. Okay?
Oh God. With that, hype train never stops.